93%. 93% of American drivers actually believe that they are, better than average behind the wheel.
Which is, I mean, mathematically, that is a complete impossibility.
Right. It makes no sense. But when you stack that up against the rest of human behavior, it really starts to look like just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, absolutely.
Because think about this. When looking at job postings, men will typically apply when they meet just 60% of the qualifications.
Yep.
While women, on the other hand, they often wait until they meet 100%.
Every single box has to be checked.
Exactly. And then there's the famous Dunning-Kruger effect, right? That widely accepted psychological rule that incompetent people are simply too clueless to realize their incompetence.
The ultimate workplace cliche.
Right. But the research we are looking at today suggests it might actually be, well, a complete mathematical illusion.
A total artifact of the data.
It blows my mind. So, welcome. You are listening to a deep dive into the cult of confidence. Today, we are analyzing a massive stack of sources, ranging from Ivy League field experiments to deep statistical economics papers.
Heavy-duty stuff.
Yeah, really fascinating material. And our mission is to figure out if our entire professional world is essentially running on a massive collective bluff. I mean, is it all just a bluff?
It's such a critical question.
Yeah.
Because we've built this society that actively rewards the performance of certainty over actual measurable skill.
Over competence.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
there's this psychological mechanism at play here. It's known in the literature as the illusion of validity.
The illusion of validity. Okay, so let's break down the actual mechanics of that. How does that illusion force us to constantly conflate confidence with competence?
Well, it basically comes down to cognitive fluency, right? And how the human brain tries to conserve energy.
Because we're lazy.
I mean, efficiently lazy, yeah.
Yeah.
The brain is constantly trying to substitute really difficult questions for easier ones.
Oh.
And evaluating someone's actual competence, that is incredibly difficult.
Right. You'd have to look at their past work, audit their skills.
It takes time, it takes expertise, deep analysis, but evaluating whether someone sounds certain, that is super easy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Our brains just naturally equate the feeling of certainty with the state of being right. So when someone speaks with like absolute unwavering conviction, our brains just bypass the hard analytical work.
We just subconsciously decide to trust them.
Exactly. We substitute the hard metric of skill for the really easy metric of volume, or just, swagger.
Swagger, yeah.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a really fascinating distinction in the source material. Because if society is structurally wired to reward people who project certainty, we have to look at the people who are supplying that certainty.
Right. Who are these highly confident people?
Yeah, and it turns out a lot of them aren't, intentionally running a con.
No, not at all. The academic literature refers to this specific phenomenon as honest overconfidence.
Honest overconfidence.
Yeah, so these individuals, they aren't actively trying to deceive their colleagues or, lie to their bosses. They're genuinely deceiving themselves.
The analogy that comes to mind here isn't a scam. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's more like an economic bubble.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because in a housing bubble, people aren't usually lying about the value of the asset. They're just caught up in irrational exuberance.
Right? They really believe it.
They genuinely believe the asset, which in this case is their own intellect or their own capability, is worth that inflated price, right up until the market forces a correction.
That is a perfect framework for it, actually.
Yeah.
And there's a study from Columbia Business School that isolated this exact dynamic.
Okay, what did they do?
So they had participants take a series of math tests, and afterward, they just asked them to estimate their own performance.
Just guess how well they did.
Yeah. And the researchers found that men consistently overestimated their performance by about 30%.
30%? That's a huge margin.
It is. And whereas women, they overestimated too, but only by 15%.
Okay, wait. So both groups are experiencing that honest overconfidence. But the magnitude of the delusion is literally doubled in men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Doubled. And, this isn't just some isolated quirk of taking tests in a lab either. It compounds over a lifetime.
How so?
Well, there is this massive longitudinal study out of University College London. They tracked thousands of people born in the UK, all in the same week in 1970.
Wow. Okay, so tracing a whole generation.
Yeah, they followed the specific cohort for over 4 decades.
That is incredible data.
It really is.
Yeah.
They measured the participants' baseline overconfidence when they were just children, and then checked back in on their careers at age 42.
Age 42. So that's usually like prime earning years.
Yeah,
right when people are hitting senior leadership roles.
precisely. And the data revealed that men were 34% more likely to be in top-tier jobs. Roles like CEOs, senior lawyers,
Yeah.
managing partners. But the most revealing data point, the real kicker, was that the researchers could attribute up to 11% of that entire gender gap in top jobs purely to the overconfidence they measured back in childhood.
Wait, really? 11% of the gap is just from childhood overconfidence?
Yes. These individuals have literally been walking around in that economic bubble of self-belief since they were kids, and the labor market just paid them a premium for it.
That significantly changes the whole narrative around workplace arrogance, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, if a leader has been financially and socially rewarded for their honest overconfidence for 40 years, of course they think their intuition is infallible.
Right. The world has always told them they're right.
Exactly, like that terrible audition on a reality singing show.
What?
The singer genuinely thinks they sound like a superstar because their mom always said so.
Yeah, the judges are horrified, but the singer is just confused.
But if we scale that up to a corporate level, if it's just a harmless delusion at home, why is it so dangerous for an organization?
Because it creates a massive structural vulnerability. Honest overconfidence, when it's left completely unchecked by reality, it metastasizes into organizational complacency.
Complacency.
Yeah, because when leaders genuinely believe they already possess all the answers, their intellectual curiosity simply dries up. They stop soliciting feedback.
And people probably stop giving it to them, too.
Exactly. Consequently, psychological safety just evaporates across their teams. Employees stop flagging potential risks. They stop sharing innovative ideas.
Because contradicting the absolute certainty in the room becomes politically dangerous.
You hit the nail on the head. The organization stagnates. Protecting the leader's illusion of being right becomes way more important than discovering what is actually true.
Wow. Okay, so if an organization is actively punishing intellectual humility and, rewarding this unearned certainty, we really have to reevaluate the ultimate framework we use to understand that certainty.
Right. The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah. Yes. For the last 2 decades, this has been the viral concept used to explain why the most incompetent people in the room are usually the loudest.
Everybody loves quoting it.
They do, but the paper from the Tinbergen Institute in our sources completely dismantles everything we thought we knew about it.
It's a total bombshell of a paper.
Yeah.
Because the original 1999 theory, it essentially proposed a metacognitive deficit.
Metacognitive. So metacognition is like the brain's ability to step outside itself and objectively evaluate its own thought processes, right?
Exactly. Thinking about thinking. And the original researchers claimed that people with low ability literally lack the necessary mental hardware to judge themselves.
Like you are so bad at the task that you don't even know what being good at it looks like.
Right, which leaves you completely blind to your own incompetence.
But the Tinbergen researchers, they approach this totally differently. Not as a psychological issue, but as a data science problem.
Yes. They applied deep statistical modeling to the way the original tests were scored, specifically focusing on boundary constraints on a 0 to 100 scale.
Okay, let me try to translate the math for you listening because this is wild. Imagine you take a test and you are just brilliant at it. You score a 99 out of 100.
Okay.
When the researchers ask you to guess your score, you are physically trapped by the boundary of the test. You literally cannot overestimate by much. You only have 1 point of runway above you.
You can't guess 150.
Right. So by sheer statistical necessity, top performers are forced to guess lower.
And then the exact inverse is true for the bottom performers. If you completely bomb the test and score a 10 out of 100, you have 90 points of room to guess higher.
And very little room to guess lower.
Exactly.
So just due to natural regression to the mean within a bounded scale, the bottom performers will always appear to be wildly overestimating their abilities. And the top performers will always appear to be underestimating them. It's just a mathematical inevitability. It's not a psychological profile at all.
The researchers at the Tinbergen Institute are very explicit about the implications here. The overestimation effect absolutely exists in the data. You can see it. But it does not reflect human nature.
That's key.
Incompetent people are not walking around with this unique psychological defect that makes them blind to their flaws. It's simply a quirk of how we measure bounded data.
That fundamentally reframes how we should view an employee or a colleague who is struggling with a task. I mean, we spent 20 years treating a math quirk as a character flaw.
Assuming unskilled people are just arrogantly unaware.
Yeah, it shifts the blame entirely away from the individual's psychology.
It does. But, this creates a really fascinating tension.
How so?
Well, if Dunning-Kruger is just a statistical illusion, but the longitudinal data like the UCL study proves that honest overconfidence still exists and pays massive dividends.
Oh,
How do these dynamics actually play out in a high-stakes corporate environment? When rubber meets the road in hiring.
that is the million-dollar question. And we can see the exact collision of these dynamics in that field experiment conducted by Iris Bonet.
Ah, yes, in the Australian public sector.
Right. They decided to investigate the reapplication penalty, specifically looking at what happens to a candidate's confidence after they endure a really major professional rejection.
Such a painful experience.
Brutal. They tracked 1,386 internal candidates who had applied for senior roles.
And these were people who made it all the way to the final interview round, right?
Yes, but ultimately did not get the job. So we are talking about a pool of highly qualified, vetted finalists.
Okay.
3 months later, the researchers tracked who was actually willing to put themselves out there again and apply for another senior role.
And what was the baseline?
The baseline finding revealed that men were 67.6% more likely to reapply after that rejection than women.
Wow, 67%. So human resources recognizes this massive gap in persistence, and they decide to run an intervention.
Right, they randomly divided the rejected finalists and sent one group what they called a confidence email.
Just trying to boost their spirits.
Yeah, it was highly encouraging. It provided quantitative feedback, explicitly telling them, you were in the top tier of applicants, please apply again.
And it worked, didn't it? It closed the gender gap.
It did close the gap, but bizarrely, it did so by causing the men's reapplication rates to absolutely plummet.
Wait, what? Why on earth did an encouraging email make the men stop trying?
I know, it's baffling. But let's look at the behavioral mechanism there. If the men were operating inside that economic bubble of honest overconfidence we talked about,
Oh, I see.
receiving a data-heavy email that emphasizes, hey, only 1 in 5 applicants make it this far, that suddenly introduces severe friction. It acts as a pin to the bubble.
It signals that the environment is far more competitive than their internal narratives suggested.
Exactly. It stripped away their unearned certainty. They basically recalibrated their risk assessment and decided the effort just wasn't worth it.
That is wild. And meanwhile, what about the women?
That same email barely moved the needle for the women in the study. To actually increase female reapplication rates, HR had to implement a completely different intervention.
The confidence plus commitment approach.
Yes. This required a personal phone call from leadership. They had to point out specific, relevant future roles and explicitly state the organization's systemic commitment to gender diversity.
And that worked.
Only then did women's reapplication rates jump by nearly 30%.
So, the men backed off when confronted with the actual reality of the competition. But the women required undeniable proof of systemic support before they would risk another rejection.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at how the system is rigged. There is a very good reason they lack systemic trust.
Absolutely, and we see that perfectly illustrated in the Harvard Evaluator study by Exley and Nielsen.
Oh, this one is frustrating.
It really adds a darker layer to all this. Because the Harvard study demonstrates exactly how the corporate system processes different displays of confidence.
Right.
Evaluators were asked to judge workers' performances. And even when these evaluators were explicitly warned beforehand that female workers statistically underestimate their own performance.
They were told about the gap before they started.
Yes. Even with that explicit warning, the evaluators consistently failed to adjust their scores.
The mechanism there has to be anchoring bias, right? Like the human brain just anchors to the first number it hears.
Exactly. So if a woman provides a humble self-evaluation, that sets the numerical anchor.
Even if the evaluator knows the anchor is artificially deflated.
The cognitive load of manually adjusting that impression upward is just too high for the brain. They take the humble self-evaluation purely at face value.
Which leads to unfairly pessimistic views of female workers across the board. The system actively penalizes humility while simultaneously failing to correct for the known confidence gap.
So we see that the system punishes women for not bragging, but it also fails them when the rules of confidence are applied unevenly.
Right, which means telling a marginalized group to just be more confident is genuinely terrible advice.
It really is.
It's a systemic trap, not a personal failing.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Thomas Chamorro Premusic argues in our sources that we have basically diagnosed the wrong disease.
Yes, his argument is fantastic. The problem is not that women lack confidence. The problem is that society conflates confidence with competence.
Exactly. His thesis is that we shouldn't be sending women to assertiveness training to just mimic overconfident men.
We need to elevate our standards for leadership.
Right.
We have to stop promoting incompetent people simply because they dominate the airspace in a meeting.
It's like Jessica Valenti really reinforces this perspective too. She points out that the confidence gap is often a sham. It's actually a rational survival strategy.
A logical response to the environment.
Yeah, a logical response to a workplace that heavily penalizes women with the likability penalty when they do show assertiveness.
Right. If asserting your competence makes you a target, retreating to caution is not a personal defect. It is a calculated defense mechanism.
I mean, telling someone to just be more confident in that scenario is like telling someone to run faster on a treadmill that has been set to go in reverse.
That is brilliant analogy.
You're demanding they fix a symptom while completely ignoring the machine that is actively working against them.
Exactly. True organizational health doesn't look like a boardroom full of people shouting their certainties at each other.
No, it requires quiet confidence.
Yes, it requires intellectual humility. Confident leaders don't need to be the loudest in the room. They influence through persuasion and deep competence, and they actually leave intellectual room to be proven wrong.
Okay, so if the corporate system is stubbornly rigged to reward the loudest voice, but we know that behaving that way leads to intellectual stagnation, how do you and I navigate this tomorrow?
That's the real challenge.
Right. We need a way to operate within the system, maybe get the job or the promotion without becoming the arrogant leaders we just critiqued.
Well, it seems like the only practical solution is to decouple the physical action of taking a risk from the internal feeling of being confident.
Okay, unpack that.
So, this is the exact framework proposed by Russ Harris in his book, The Confidence Gap. He argues that the personal development industry has sold us a massive myth.
What's the myth?
The idea that you must feel a sense of unwavering confidence before you are allowed to take action.
Oh, wow. Which ties perfectly back to that statistic about the job applications from the intro.
Exactly. The women waiting until they meet 100% of the qualifications are waiting for a feeling of total safety.
A feeling of absolute readiness that simply does not exist.
Never. Harris offers a completely different formula. He defines genuine confidence as action plus acceptance.
Action plus acceptance.
True confidence is born from taking values-driven action while simultaneously accepting all the uncomfortable emotions that come with it.
You accept the fear, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, rather than waiting for them to magically disappear.
Because they won't.
Hmm.
You let the fear come along for the ride, but you do not let it drive the car.
I love that. So practically speaking, if you are listening to this and you're looking at a job posting tomorrow, the takeaway isn't to artificially inflate your ego.
Not at all.
The takeaway is to apply at 60% and accept the terror of being underqualified.
Let the hiring manager tell you no. Do not reject yourself in advance.
Don't do their job for them.
Right. And furthermore, Scott H. Young introduces this great concept of humble confidence. He notes that possessing skill without humility just results in stagnant arrogance.
So how do we practice humble confidence?
You have to audit your everyday language. Instead of entering a meeting and declaring, I am sure this is the right strategy, you pivot slightly.
To what?
You say, I am confident in this approach, but let's test it against the data.
Oh, that linguistic shift is incredibly powerful.
It changes everything.
Because it projects the competence required by the system, right? It sets a strong numerical anchor for your capability, but it maintains the intellectual humility necessary for actual innovation.
It allows you to be wrong without losing face.
Yeah.
You embrace the discomfort of not knowing everything because acknowledging your blind spots is the exact mechanism by which lasting competence is actually built.
Well, it entirely changes our relationship with our own internal monologues, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we spend our professional lives trying to meditate, or just manage our self-doubt out of existence.
That's it's an illness.
Exactly. But perhaps the feeling of imposter syndrome is not a pathology we need to cure. It is not a red flag warning you that you do not belong in the room.
What is it then?
What if that highly specific, uncomfortable sensation is simply the physical friction of your brain actively learning and expanding its capacity?
Wow.
What if the goal isn't to banish self-doubt, but to invite it to the table as undeniable proof that you are finally stretching your limits?
That is a paradigm shift. We have covered massive ground today. We dismantled the math behind the Dunning-Kruger effect, exposed the honest overconfidence that inflates our economic and professional bubbles, and realized that action must always precede the feeling of readiness.
That's been a ride.
It really has. As you head back to your day, take a look at the structures around you. Stop waiting for the illusion of total certainty. Embrace the friction of learning. Test your own boundaries, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.